listening to Arteetude, a podcast with artists created and produced by Detlef Schlich, a visual artist and ritual designer, living and loving in West Cork, and best known for his essay about the cause and effect of shamanism, art and digital culture. Working in the field of performance, photography, painting, sound, installations, and film, he will dive and discover with us and a weekly creative guest into the unknown and exciting deep ocean of the creative mind.
Hello, dear listeners. This is Detlef Schlich, and you listen to Arteetude. Today, we dive into the unknown and exciting deep ocean of the creative mind together with David Seeger. Hi, David.
Hi.
Last part, we talked about his time in Leeds as a teacher for 25 years. And I must say, he has a lot of knowledge. It's incredible. So, guys, listen to it. It's really very informative. I hope that we can continue our talk here outside in my garden because the farmer was working with his tractor, and it's still his break. It's what is it, half one or something like this, and I hope he will stay away for more than half hour or an hour, whatever, so fingers crossed. All right, David.
Hello.
We gonna stop. I'd already mentioned there. So yeah, I mean, your time in Leeds, did you enjoy the art college? I mean, it was probably very much different than nowadays studying art, isn't it?
Well, it was unique. It was the only college in Europe that was, bar the Bauhaus, that was actually based not on an academic classical structure.
Who was teaching the Bauhaus things? You?
Well, the teachers who were informative of what we did were people. There were architects, Gropius and Mies van der Rohe and Corbusier.
And they came and
No. But we were introduced to them by. That was one of the beautiful things that happened. There was on the School of Architecture course at the same college was a mature student called David Lewis, who was the biographer of Brancusi. But he was highly knowledgeable in modern art. He was a very close friend of Barbara Hepworth. Many artists in Cornwall. He'd lived in Cornwall for quite a long time. People like Terry Frost.
I've heard it's beautiful there. I mean,
Roger Hilton, the up-and-coming moderns. Remember, this was 1955.
Yeah.
These people were just at their beginnings.
Absolutely.
Terry Frost was local to us. He did teach us. He was Gregory Fellow at Leeds University.
Yeah.
So he had his colour theory firsthand. But David Lewis was extremely instrumental in our education. He had at his disposal 35mm slides that were just beginning to be available, Kodak and
so it was supported by
Agfa were producing this fabulous colour film.
Yeah.
So slides could be projected in full colour. He had the whole armoury of photos he'd taken of European art, which he shared with us. He'd met many of them. He told us about Brancusi. He met him and knew him before he died. So we had that firsthand. One of the best modern sculptors the world has ever had. The Bauhaus teachers, people like Joseph Albers, Paul Klee, all put theoretical ideas about educating artists. Albers went on to America and opened his own art school. Paul Clay's renowned for his studies and theoretical work, as well as his performance in his own work.
Yeah.
And one of the things, our new head of department, Harry Sobram,
All right.
who brought this together as a course, which he called the basic course, which began, as I say, with this point and line kind of thing. But he, in fact, was not an abstract artist in that classical, or not classical, but fundamental abstract sense. He was far more of a Zen performer, and he made a much more intuitive formulation of very sticky, wet canvases that explored colour and simplicity, but with the material more than with the actual illusion.
A lot of things were explored in this time and discovered.
Well, we were right. I mean, there was a lot going on in America. We heard about that. People like Sam Francis and Pollock.
Yeah.
All that was going on simultaneously. It was on the grapevine.
I mean, I'm getting frustrated if I see all that what happens in the 60s, because
Yeah.
nowadays...
Well, this was 50s.
50s.
Before the 60s.
Yeah, which is weird.
It did blossom out. The basic course became written down in a book and everybody took it as a recipe. It was never a recipe.
Yeah.
It was never intended in that kind of sense. So we initially I went, as I say, as a pencil drawer with probably a prospect of having a career in the graphics or advertising world or illustration or something like that.
Yeah.
And the obligatory teacher training year, and I'd end up as some kind of art teacher. Now, it all changed with this new course that came in, and I ended up going to an evening class for pottery.
All right.
And ended up becoming I managed the ceramic studio, and ceramics not as a pottery craft.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a craft, and we did all the craft skills, but it was another way of making fine art. The material was it gave an extra loop to follow for the fine artist. And I became one of them, and I ended up making original work that I can claim some originality. I did a great deal of casting and making things in moulds, taking facsimiles of objects by throwing plaster on them, and I had some very remarkable students.
I mean, clay is great.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Well, clay and plaster and any other material that you put with it. You don't necessarily have to stick to the one material.
Sure.
But my students, one of whom became a very well-known potter, Carol McNichol, who sells work. Yeah. She started selling teapots to Japan. Had a big exhibition. She's extremely well known.
Wow.
Well looking up.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
Looking up.
Didn't you fancy in this time then quitting your job as a teacher and doing more for yourself? I mean,
I didn't do that till I left in 1988. I always made work. That was one of the beauties of that school, was that the teachers were employed as artists and they were given time to do their own work. In a 5-day week, we had a whole day about doing our own work, either on the premises or elsewhere.
I think if you're once in the mill, you're in the mill, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, life changed completely, and you're part of the institutions, and which is secure. You get your money.
I always saw my role as the cheerleader, the ringmaster. I didn't It was their art, it was their work. It was my job to kind of steer them towards making it in a better way, giving more, digesting what they were doing better.
That's what good teachers are doing, isn't it?
Refining and asking questions and being able to stand back from something and not get too bound up with it so that you can see it from a distance. But as I say, and the end product isn't an artist. The end product is a creative mind that might go into a different profession entirely. One of the remarkable ones that very few people know about was a man called Philip Orchard. He made teapots with me, and he made really very clever teapots.
Yeah.
But he was interested in theatre, props, and he liked acting. He was very, very kind of enthusiastic.
And he was English, probably, wasn't he?
He was English. He was very gifted. He went to a gifted sixth form college in Birmingham, and we took him direct onto the course. He didn't do a pre-diploma course. He came straight to us. But the proof was in the pudding. When he left, he got a job behind the scenes in the theatre at the Leeds Playhouse, and very soon became very skilled at making props. He was a master of polystyrene and chainsaws. Ended up with his own company making props for the Olympic Games opening ceremonies. All of them, apart from Beijing. Now, he was able to he made castles for sheikhs in the desert out of polystyrene, painted up as the facsimile of the real thing. He made a model of the Eurostar train before the Eurostar train existed.
I might put a link into it as well. So we have to think about that, because I would love to see this work as well.
Well, there's very little I can show him. I've just bought the DVD of the opening ceremony of the English Olympic Games, where he did all these big, with Danny Boyle doing these, this amazing kind of installations of the National Health Service at Telford, and the whole illusion of British creative history that was put on the stage in a massive arena.
Wow. Yeah, I can't imagine.
Philip did that. His little company produced that, and he'd done it for all the other remarkable opening ceremonies. Never existed.
Yeah. Wow.
He never got the credit for the poor man. Died. He had a bad lung condition when he was with us. I met up with him again about 5 years ago when he was on the list, and he had been for at least 10 years for a lung transplant.
All right.
And eventually got it. And then it was all very successful, and then 6 months or so afterwards he had to have a checkup and some minor adjustment, and he had a hemorrhage, and it finished him off. Mid-50s, a very young man, but he made his mark. Great privilege of mine to have had.
It is a very exhausting job as well if you have this responsibility, isn't it? I mean, you're probably 15 hours a day looking and checking and everything.
I've no idea of that at all. I've no idea of his actual. That is the.
I mean, that's time is money for them.
Behind the scenes, he had a remarkable team.
Yeah.
He wasn't a one-man band. He had a company who produced these things.
Yeah.
But
so you saw many from your students going and becoming a proper artist, which is very difficult in the art world.
There aren't many of them, but there are other people, like Mark Armand was one of my students who did ceramics, and he ended up being a very well-known pop star.
Mark Armand, yeah, I still know him. It is Mark Armand from, what is the band again?
Soft Cell.
Yeah, Tainted Love, right.
Two of them. Tainted Love. That's his,
absolutely.
It wasn't his song, actually, that one. He sang it. Somebody else's song. But
yeah.
he's still at it, and he's theatrical. He does acting and all sorts of stuff. He didn't respond to my little attempt to get near him again, but
do you think that it was easier to make an income as artists in the 50s, 60s than nowadays?
There's no answer to that question.
Yeah.
I can't answer that. I mean, I've had the privilege of being given to start with a part-time job that paid me, I think I got something like 3 days part-time teaching, and it was very lucrative. It was a really good income. Maybe £100 a week.
Yeah, I mean,
the equivalent nowadays of maybe 400, something like that.
I just wonder. I mean, it generally because, I mean, the population is far more bigger nowadays as well, and I wonder if it's already oversaturated somehow. You know.
The only people who make a living in the arts are the administrators.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
There are a few who sell work, but most of the art world is financed for the administrators. They build buildings for the administrators, not for the artists.
No. So what do you think? What is the role of an artist?
The artist dreams for his community.
Yeah.
And it might be a big community, it might be just a little one, it might be his family.
Yeah.
Her family.
Yeah, I mean, but
there is no recipe. There never was.
I know. I think that's the best case scenario.
There is a tradition of famous artists, people like Damien Hirst, who's a travesty. Even Warhol is somebody I don't rate particularly highly. It's an industry. It's and even Henry Moore. I could talk about him quite a lot, but Henry Moore ended up his best work was his hand carved stone between the 1930 and 1940, which was real, and it was him. After that, he became a modeller, and he had students making his work.
Yeah.
The really genuine Henry Moores were the little models, the best reclining figure he made.
Yeah.
It's about 11 inches.
Okay.
Solid bronze. It's the most immaculate object.
Yeah.
Which takes me back to a little story if we've time.
If we have, we're gonna probably do it another time for sure. I see you.
Well, put it on the record now. You fit it in where you feel like. But I was way back in the early 60s, mid 60s, would say. My first wife's mother worked in an antique shop, and she was on the grapevine for the antiques. For instance, she sold Crown Derby plates to the big fairground that came to Leeds, adjacent to where her shop was on Woodhouse Moor.
Okay.
And these people, they'd a lot of wealth but no space, so they ate off £400 Crown Derby plates for their dinner.
Yeah.
But anyway, she knew these people who had a collection of glasses. And in England there was something called an old ale glass, which was a very simple conical glass that held about a quarter of a pint on a stem, which was a little globe, and then the disc, so that this cone globe circle.
Yeah.
Were as common as jam jars way back 100 years ago.
All right.
These people had a collection, so we engineered a trip to their house to see this collection.
Yeah.
The point was that when people had a drink with one of those glasses, they drank it up and threw the glass
No
into
way.
the fireplace.
No.
Now, by 1960,
Yeah.
the only old ale glasses in the world were in their collection. There were 150 left, and they had them all. So we went to this house.
All right.
The point of the story is not glasses.
Yeah.
On the mantelpiece was this little silver sculpture of Atlas, solid silver.
Okay.
Atlas with the world on his shoulders. It was about 11 inches high, maybe less, 9 inches high. And I kept looking at this, and it caught my eye, and I give myself credit for noticing it.
All right.
But I could see this man and his wife looking at each other. Shall we tell him? And he eventually nodded his head. And she said, "Would you like to hold it?"
Yeah.
So she gave me this, probably 4 pounds of
Massive.
solid silver.
Yeah.
She said, you're very good. We don't tell people what that is.
Yeah.
It was Benvenuto Cellini, original.
All right.
It was the real thing. It was uninsurable. Nobody knew they had it. It disappeared.
Yeah.
Where they got it from or how, I was more or less sworn into secrecy. And that's why I'm not telling you the name.
No, don't do it, please. I mean,
this was one of the most extraordinary pieces of art I've ever seen.
Wow.
And that man carried the world on his shoulders.
So did you ever wash your fingers after that? Oh yes, now in your Corona.
Well, it wasn't that. It was just the fact that this man had modelled this.
Yeah.
And it didn't have to be, kind of enormous.
Yeah.
It wasn't a Damien Hirst.
I think
it was 9 inches high.
Yeah.
As was the Venus of Willendorf. Everybody thinks that's a gigantic sculpture.
Yeah.
4 inches high is the Venus of Willendorf.
I think you can feel that spirit if you have it in your hand.
Personal.
Yeah, absolutely. David, I thank you very much for this story. I would say for today we leave it. We are already over 20 minutes, and the attention span of listeners is for 18 minutes.
Okay.
So it was great. Thank you for having me here.
My pleasure.
Really good. Bye bye, and bye, my lovely audience. Ciao. This is a listener-supported show. I feel honored if you subscribe this show. You can follow me non-financial with the following click on one of my Instagram accounts, or subscribe to the visual version of this podcast on YouTube via the link below. If you like what you hear, be sure to tune in this Sunday for the third part of this Arteetude audio triptych. If you want to leave a donation for a coffee or a bus ticket, just follow the donation link via the Arteetude Podcast account. Eventually, I would like to thank, through this medium, all my members and listeners of the I Love West Cork Artists Network from all over the world, just to remember myself that without you, this here couldn't and wouldn't happen.
You have listened to Arteetude, West Cork's first art, fashion and design podcast. Arteetude, never so close again. That was too close.